Another year, another session of watching Glastonbury, crying on the couch at the fact I'm not there. But one thing that I did enjoy was Elton John busting out Brandon Flowers in his finest monorail man outfit to sing Tiny Dancer with him. And whilst I was ultimately vibing to my highest potential, I realised that despite how much I love Brandon Flowers due to the Killers being one of my favourite bands, and having high regards for them to the same extent as Arctic Monkeys, I've barely mentioned them on this channel besides a handful of times. And throughout growing up I always thought, how ace is it that my idols all came from the same place as me? Granted, besides Queen being from all over the shop, they were typically based in London, as was David Bowie. And a lot of them were from the north of England, such as the Beatles being from Liverpool, Oasis and the Smiths from Manchester, and Arctic Monkeys from Yorkshire. And of course the Killers being from England. They're from where? What, Las Vegas? You what, mate? Mr. Brightside is a classic UK belter. How are they from America? But despite such, I've always still admired them, and well, what better way to kick off introducing my favourite band to my collection of finely esteemed, and mostly terrible, fantastic videos, by ensuring that I instantly alienate any of my existing viewers and any potential viewers. Now, I would like to add one sizable disclaimer to this video. If you couldn't tell, I absolutely love the Killers. They were one of the first bands I got into myself outside of my parents' and siblings' music, and as such, always have loved them since. So I think it goes without saying, but I must say, for the sake of my own sanity, I love all of these albums. And just as a feel, a nod towards it, I'll give an honourable mention to Don't Waste Your Wishes. As whilst it's a nice album, it's a Christmas album, folks. Now let's get on to why I hate all of these albums in some way, so buckle in, Buster, here we go. Now, coming in at a pretty convincing and easy last place for me is Battleborn. Now, my apologies if you love this record, as the next few seconds may be a bitter pill to swallow for you. But this album feels a tad generic, and dare I say it, feels like one to fill the time. And didn't really have any standout songs at all, whereas the other albums do at least have one. Now, I understand if you like this album, this may be hard to hear, so I hope you're doing okay. But it really doesn't have any standout songs, I'm so sorry. Now, does that mean it's a bad album? Absolutely not. It still sounds like the Killers and is full of okay Killers songs, and I enjoy having it on every now and then. And I'd probably still rather listen to Battleborn than a lot of other albums, but in comparison to the rest of the band's discography, this sits in an easy last place for me. I'm so sorry. Coming in at 6th place is Wonderful Wonderful. Wonderful Wonderful unashamedly comes in with big attitude, reflecting on a very uptight and in-your-face personality, from what feels like a very tense vocal delivery from Brandon's play towards the respective mentioned attitude of the album, really shown off in the title track Wonderful Wonderful, Run for Cover, The Calling, and of course, the Macho Man tune which I play while staring in the mirror every morning, The Man. Whilst this album does have the solid attitude, I feel there's still a few too many dips in it where songs don't really match the vibe of what's overall trying to go on. And as an album, it's quite a strange listening experience that almost makes me feel a tad bipolar, going from in-your-face masculine attitude to very quiet, normal, jaunty Killers songs. Overall though, it's still an album I enjoy, but the mismatch of vibes sometimes is a bit hard to overcome for me. But it certainly does have its highlight tracks as a record. In 5th place is Pressure Machine. Now, outside of consistently calling this album Come Down Machine by accident like some old man who can't get over the Strokes, Pressure Machine provides us some pretty nice and breezy tracks such as Sleepwalker and In Another Life. But is it just me, or is this album incredibly quiet? Now, unless my earphones, speaker, laptop and actual ears are broken, every time I listen to this album, it seems the mix of the production makes all the tracks really quiet and a bit hard to listen to, which does affect how much I enjoy listening to the album, as it seems absolutely silent 1 second, only to have the volume turned right up and my eardrums absolutely destroyed by In the Car Outside, which to be fair, I do like as a tune anyway. Now, maybe that's just me and I get it, but also the album seems to be heavily influenced by certain country styles of folk music, which isn't particularly my bag of frogs either. But despite all of the aforementioned, I still didn't realise how much I quite enjoy this album until I re-listened to it again a few months ago. And I was surprised it ended up at this position on the list ahead of Wonderful Wonderful, probably as much as you are too. But when there's something about an album, there's just something about an album. And for an album to win you over in such a way, despite not being fully to your taste and having some production issues, you can only applaud such an effort. I think for me it comes through that form of self-reflection and almost admittance of desperation and loneliness that is really well done through the lyrics and vocal performance on the album. But if they could fix the volume mixing on it, that'd be great, thanks. Coming in at a hot 4th is Day and Age. Now, most notably on Day and Age is the behemoth synth-pop track of Human, which, to be honest, if the rest of the album was absolute garbage, would still likely get Day and Age into 4th spot for me. As let's be honest, Human is an absolute tune. But thankfully, the rest of the album is still pretty good. I mean, we have some pretty jazzy tunes on this album, such as Joyride and I Can't Stay, that provide levels of funkiness that remind me of later songs by The Strokes. And there's still the standard Killers power ballads too, through Dustland Fairy Tale and Neon Tiger. And is it just me or does Losing Touch sound a bit like a U2 song, with the vocals sounding a lot like good old Bono? But maybe that's just me. And as great as all of that is, I still do think there's a couple of holes in the album that go a bit under the radar, especially with the ending track of Goodnight Travel Well, which for me really doesn't work nor have much impact to culminate the listening experience of over what is a pretty decent album. And I think it's great to have an absolute anthem on the album, such as Human, but it really does feel like none of the other tunes on the album even stand anywhere close to Human in terms of impact and quality, which can really make a lot of the other tracks quite forgetful. And I guess that's merely the double-edged sword of only having one absolute banger on the album. It's great because you've got one successfully made banger, and it's better to have one banger than no bangers. But alas, only one banger makes it seem as if there's no other bangers on the album. I'm sure that'll make sense to someone out there. Moving on, next we have Imploding The Mirage, sat happily in 3rd. Now, maybe this is a bit of a rogue shout, and I can understand why people are not happy with the fact I've put this album ahead of Day and Age. But I mean, be gentle, I'm just trying to be honest here. Something about Imploding The Mirage really does give me that nostalgic feeling of hearing the Killers for the first time, in their all-encompassing grandiose stature of songs, belting out some incredibly loud synths, alongside Brandon's echoing voice on tracks such as Caution and My Own Soul's Warning. Like, honestly, I feel these tracks have been taken straight out of the mid-2000s and kicked into modern day, with some more updated production styles, and I think they're genuinely fantastic songs and incredibly underappreciated. And I guess that's why I'm a bit tetchy about putting it in 3rd, because I think the album's overall a bit underappreciated. And I know the Day and Age fans will be coming at me with a relentlessness that can only be compared to the hordes of unnecessarily angry and bitter Arctic Monkeys humbug fans. But honestly, I'd give this album another go if you didn't pay too much attention to it or just skipped it entirely. There's some real echoes of the past in there, brought without a longing for them to feel like they're based in nostalgia. They just feel fresh and tasteful, yet still adhering to that classic Killers sound somehow, and I always enjoy this album. If I had anything bad to say about it, I'd say it all kind of just sounds a bit too similar. But because I like it, that's not a massive issue for me, but it may be for other people. Now, coming to the final 2 albums, it was always highly likely that it would be between their debut Hot Fuss and their follow-up album Sam's Town. And I'm guessing half of the people watching right now are about to be either very happy or very angry, depending on which side of the fence you sit on. So sitting at 2nd place for me is Hot Fuss. Now, hold your horses, sports fans, because I love Hot Fuss, and let me explain a bit why it's 2nd for me. Now, outside of accidentally calling this album Hot Fuzz out of pure habit for about 10 years, I do love this album back to front and know every single song dear-heartedly. Clearly, besides how to pronounce the actual album's name. You can't deny the quality of this album either, or the fact that it's packed with fantastic songs that still stand out in the Killers' discography, where Smile Like You Mean It is probably my 3rd favourite Killers song. And well, the album also has the absolute belters of All These Things That I've Done, Somebody Told Me, and the absolute monster and ultimate British night out anthem of Mr. Brightside, taking centre stage and seemingly staying in the top 40 charts probably until the end of time itself. And the album undoubtedly had significant cultural impact for the mid-2000s music scene in many similar ways to Whatever People Say I Am by Arctic Monkeys. So if there's such outstanding quality on Hot Fuss combined with the impact it had at the time, how on earth is it 2nd? Well, for me it comes down to the personal connection I have to Sam's Town, which arguably has just as much quality on it anyway. See, When You Were Young was the first song I remember hearing by the Killers when I was about 10 years old, and it really impacted me, making me think, wow, I've discovered this band that is amazing. And I discovered it all by myself, not with my parents or siblings. And the song really struck up an impression on me in the mid-2000s, despite being so young. And ultimately, it's what hooked me on them and made me a fan ever since, now even into my late 20s. And every time I hear When You Were Young play, it throws me back to being 10 and hearing that song for the first time. A pretty weird but still very wholesome experience, I must say. So overall, I think that's why I'll always prefer Sam's Town to Hot Fuss. From that personal connection I made to the tunes on Sam's Town when I heard it when I was just a wee lad. Or for a horrible pun, when I was young. And it helps that the album is full of absolute belters as well, right from the title track Sam's Town through to Bling, For Reasons Unknown, Read My Mind, Bones, and the transition from Interlude at the start of the album only to end with Exitlude. It always hits me right in the emotional gut, making me feel as if I'm some kind of family member that isn't seen enough, but any time spent together is appreciated to its utmost potential. I think Sam's Town is probably my top 10 albums of all time. Still down to that impression it made on me as a kid, discovering a band I'd continued loving throughout my life so far. And it's also because it's full of absolute top class bangers, with excellent writing, production and performing. An album that's had a lasting impact on me for me and my music preferences, and one that likely always will. I think, admittedly, if I looked at the overall quality of the tracks on both albums from a purely objective point of view, maybe Hot Fuss is better. But that'd be like calling Sam's Town a 9 and Hot Fuss a 9.1. So for me, there's still not too much in it. But once again, that impression it made on me being my first Killers album that's related into my music tastes even today or even making this channel. I shan't ever betray this album in any way. It will always sit top for me. I mean, come on, what can I say? Nothing ever quite hits like hearing Brandon Flowers singing the words, "I see Sam's Town," on the track Sam's Town, on the album Sam's Town, as the opening track of Sam's Town. A masterpiece, some would say. So there we are, my list of the Killers albums ranked from worst to best. Once again, I do actually love all these albums, and the Killers are one of my favourite bands. And after realising I hadn't spoken too much about them on the channel yet, do expect more of my dreadful chat about this fantastic band in the future. Let me know your list in the comments and to what extent my ranking offends you. I do enjoy reading the abuse. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you're new here. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.